Chapter 6, Imagination. The workshop of the mind. The fifth step towards riches. The imagination is literally the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man. The impulse, the desire, is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imagination faculty of the mind. It has been said that man can create anything which he can imagine. Of all of the ages of civilization, this is the most favorable for the development of the imagination because it is an age of rapid change. On every hand, one may contact stimuli which develop the imagination. Through the aid of his imaginative faculty, man has discovered and harnessed more of nature's forces during the past 50 years than during the entire history of the human race. Previous to that time, he has conquered the air so completely that the birds are a poor match for him in flying. He has harnessed the ether and made it serve as a means of instantaneous communication with any part of the world. He has analyzed and weighed the sun at a distance of millions of miles, and he has determined through the aid of imagination the elements of which it consists. He has discovered that his own brain is both a broadcasting and a receiving station for the vibration of thought, and he is beginning now to learn how to make practical use of this discovery. He has increased the speed of locomotive until he may now travel at a speed of more than 300 miles an hour. The time will soon come when a man may have breakfast in New York and lunch in San Francisco. Man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of his imagination. He has not yet reached the apex of development in the use of his imaginative faculty. He has merely discovered that he has an imagination and has commenced to use it in a very elementary way. Two forms described here of imagination. The imaginative faculty in two forms. One is known as synthetic imagination, and the other is creative imagination. Synthetic imagination defined. Through this faculty, one may arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. This faculty creates nothing. It merely works with the material of experience, education, and observation with which it is fed. It is the faculty used most by the inventor, with the exception of the genius, who draws upon the creative imagination or he cannot solve his problem through synthetic imagination. Creative imagination. Through the faculty of creative imagination, the finite mind of the man has direct communication with infinite intelligence. It is the faculty through which hunches and inspirations are received. It is by this faculty that all basic or new ideas are handed over to man. It is through this faculty that thought vibrations from the minds of others are received. It is through this faculty that one individual may tune in or communicate with the subconscious mind of other men. The creative imagination works automatically in the manner described in subsequent pages. This faculty functions only when the conscious mind is vibrating at an exceedingly rapid rate. As for example, when the conscious mind is stimulated through the emotion of a strong desire. The creative faculty becomes more alert, more receptive to vibrations from the sources mentioned, in proportion to its development through use. The statement is significant. Ponder it before passing on. Keep in mind as you follow these principles that the entire story of how one may convert desire into money cannot be told in one statement. The story will be complete only when one has mastered, assimilated, and begun to make use of all the principles. The great leaders of business, industry, finance, and the great artists, musicians, poets, and writers became great because they developed the faculty of creative imagination. Both the synthetic and creative faculties of imagination become more alert with use, just as any muscle organ in the body develops through use. Desire is only a thought, an impulse. It is nebulous and ephemeral. It is abstract and of no value until it has been transformed into its physical counterpart, while the synthetic imagination is the one which will be used most frequently in the process of transforming the impulse of desire into money. You must keep in mind the fact that you may face circumstances and situations which demand use of the creative imagination as well. Your imagination faculty may have become weak through inaction. It can be revived and made alert through use. This faculty does not die, though it may become quiescence through lack of use. Center your attention for a time being on the development of a synthetic imagination, because this is a faculty which you will use more often in the process of converting desire into money. Transformation of the intangible impulse of desire into the tangible reality of money calls for the use of a plan or plans. These plans must be formed with the aid of the imagination, and mainly with the synthetic faculty. Read the entire book through, then come back to this chapter, and begin at once to put your imagination to work on the building of a plan or plans for the transformation of your desire into money. Detailed instructions for building of plans have been given in almost every chapter. Carry out the instructions best suited to your needs. Reduce your plan to writing if you have not already done so. The moment you complete this, you will have a definitely given concrete form to your intangible desire. Read the preceding sentence once more. Read it out loud, very slowly as you do so. Remember that the moment you reduce the statement of your desire and a plan for its realization to writing, you have actually taken the first step of a series of steps which will enable you to convert through the thought into its physical counterpart. The earth on which you live, you yourself and every other material thing are a result of evolutionary change, through which microscopic bits of matter have been organized and arranged into an orderly fashion. Moreover, and this statement is of stupendous importance, this earth, every one of the billions of individual cells of your body, and every atom of matter began with an intangible form of energy. Desire is a thought impulse. Thought impulses are forms of energy. When you begin with the thought impulse, desire to accumulate money, you are drafting into your service the same stuff that nature used in creating this earth and every material form in the universe, including the body and brain in which thought impulses function. As far as science has been able to determine, the entire universe consists of but two elements, matter and energy. Through the combination of energy and matter has been created everything perceivable to man, from the largest star which floats in the heavens down to and including man himself. You are now engaged in the task of trying to profit by nature's method. You are sincerely and earnestly, we hope, trying to adapt yourself to nature's law by endeavoring to convert desire into its physical or monetary equivalent. You can do it. It has been done before. You can build a fortune through the aid of laws which are immutable. But first you must become familiar with these laws. and learn to use them. Through repetition and by approaching the description of these principles from every conceivable angle, the author hopes to reveal to you the secret through which every great fortune has been accumulated. Strange and paradoxical as it may seem, the secret is not a secret. Nature herself advertises in its earth on which we live the stars, the planets suspended within our view, in the elements above and around us, in every blade of grass, and every form of life within our vision. Nature advertises this secret in the terms of biology, in the conversion of tiny cells so small that it may be lost on the point of a pin into the human being now reading this line. The conversion of desire into its physical equivalent is certainly no more miraculous. Do not become discouraged if you have not fully comprehended all of these that have been stated. Unless you have long been a student of the mind, it is not to be expected that you will assimilate all of this in this chapter upon reading it the first time. But you will in time make good progress. The principles which follow will open the way for understanding of imagination. Assimilate that which you understand as you read this philosophy for the first time. Then when you reread and study it, you will discover that something has happened to clarify it and give you a broader understanding of the whole. Above all, do not stop, nor hesitate in your study of these principles until you have read the book at least 3 times. Then you will not want to stop. How to make practical use of imagination. Ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. Ideas are products of the imagination. Let us examine a few well-known ideas which have yielded huge fortunes with hope that these illustrations will convey definite information concerning the method by which imagination may be used in accumulating riches. The Enchanted Kettle. This is the story of how Coca-Cola started from a early time. 50 years ago, so this is 1930, so this would have been 50 years prior to that, so 1880, something like that. An old country doctor drove to a town, and this is talking again about how Coca-Cola was started. He hitched a horse and quietly slipped into a drugstore by the back door and began talking to the young clerk. His mission was destined to yield great wealth to many people. It was destined to bring to the South the most far-flung benefit since the Civil War. For more than an hour, behind the prescription counter, the old doctor and the clerk talked in low tones. Then the doctor left. He went out to the buggy and brought back in a large old-fashioned kettle and a wooden paddle for use to stir with the contents in the kettle, and deposited them in the back of the store. The clerk inspected the kettle, reached into his inside pocket, took out a roll of bills, and handed it over to the doctor. The roll contained exactly $500, the clerk's entire savings. The doctor handed over a small slip of paper on which it was written the secret formula. So this secret formula is the formula by which Coca-Cola was founded upon. Basically, this ran into, they started the company, it took off, and in the 1930s and the 40s, during the war, that's when Coca-Cola became really popular. And it was in a huge market. And I'll let you read it yourself. It's very fascinating, actually, on chapter 6. And I'll just continue on with what I'm reading about. And also there's a story in here about what would I do if I had $1 million. I've read this in other books. I've seen it on TV, on the movie Office Space, in the their ideas and what they're going to do. It's kind of interesting. But the book goes over it. And again, this is published in 1930s. So $1 million was definitely a lot of money then. And maybe the term, even if you had $1 million, came from this book, perhaps. And it's very, very good. I'm reading chapter 6. And it talks about defining a plan. And it talks about the history of RCA, how they came about, how they were founded, formed, if you will. The history, really, of radio, essentially, is in here. It's very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. I'm going to read the last paragraph of this chapter 6. Ideas are intangible forces, but they have more power than the physical brains that give birth to them. They have the power to live on after the brain that creates them has returned to dust. For example, take the power of Christianity. That began with a simple idea, born in the brain of Christ. Its chief tenet was, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Christ has gone back to the source from whence he came, but his idea goes marching on. Someday it may grow up and come into its own. Then it will have fulfilled Christ's deep desire. The idea has been developing only 2,000 years. Give it time. Thank you for listening to my rendition of Chapter 6 of Think and Grow Rich.